What next, really? And I sent you around, I think, an email yesterday as a reminder with the points that I think we'd got to in previous meetings, the sort of 4 themes or 4 areas that I think we'd started to develop, and a few other ideas which we may want to kick around. I think the first thing is really about communications, and it's a critical area. And we've obviously had the benefit in the past of support from Alice, who was with Wild East, but is now on maternity leave. So there is a bit of a gap there. Harry, as I've said, has been working on the website, which I think is starting to come into shape quite well. But that's obviously only one element of this. She did email me yesterday and say that she's obviously ready to go in terms of some of the social media channels that she's been working on. And she had the idea that maybe as a start, we could perhaps feature some photographs or other material from some of the existing Nature Connection projects or opportunities that there are going around. That's the first thing to get your views on. And I guess, thinking about the rest of this calendar year, A, what are the priorities for us in terms of communications, and B, how do we take that forward? And it's really a case, I think, of I'm hoping that one or more of you will be prepared to perhaps pitch in and take a bit more of a leading role on this, perhaps working with Harry and opening up our channels of communication with the various audiences that we've identified. Anyone want to kick off on that in terms of where you think we're at and where you think we should be going, sort of priority wise? I'll take hands up as well as virtual hands up if you want. Who's going to be first? Come on, someone be brave.
I'm going to ask a question, actually. What are we publicising? So there's almost a chicken and an egg of the agenda items today of actually what are we publicising? So communications are great, but are we publicising the mapping? Are we looking for volunteers? Are we talking about what is it that we need?
Yeah, very good question. I think if you go back to the vision and aims that we agreed some time ago, the aims were, I think, expressed in terms of the different audiences that we were trying to reach, and also the messages or communications that we were trying to tailor to them, if you like. So, I mean, coming from your own point of view, Sam, obviously connecting with young people is vitally important, and children as well to some extent. And I guess for me, it's about raising the profile of Nature Connection and its importance, advertising or promoting what's already out there. And obviously we'll come on to talk about how we're gathering the information on those existing opportunities in a moment. I guess getting their involvement. We've talked about that in the past, haven't we? How do we get them involved? We had a couple of 2 or 3 people on at the launch, which was great. But one of the areas perhaps for discussion is how do we properly engage young people in this process, on this campaign? So I don't know if that helps, but, without going through all the different audiences, we've obviously got organisations that are currently out there doing stuff, organisations that are perhaps working with children and young people, but aren't necessarily promoting or delivering Nature Connection. We've got businesses, and other audiences as well to reach, I think. Ben, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. I think, I think one of the things that interests me, and I think that comes before a lot of this is the mapping and trying to, in terms of priorities, trying to make that available to all of the organisations that are doing Nature Connection, because a large part of reaching young people is knowing what is for everybody who is involved in Nature Connection, knowing what is out there and where it is, and being able to do some really useful wayfinding for young people and saying, why don't you check out this organisation? Why don't you check out this one? So in terms of what are our priorities, one that seems very high for me is that mapping and that wayfinding for organisations, so they can then pass that on to young people.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come on and talk about the mapping in a bit more detail in a moment, but I think really what you're saying, just to turn it around, is essentially what we've just talked about, which is actually promoting what's already out there to children and young people and raising the profile of those and getting them engaged where that's possible. Is that how you see it?
Yeah. But I do see, you know, there's certain, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is we need to know as much of this information before we can pass it on.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. That's fine.
I fully support that. I think that the mapping is probably a key one, and on the website, even just initially we have links to all the current members or providers within it. That will be a good starting. But I know I sent some. Obviously, there's links I sent very early on to a whole range of resources. I think just like links to those local providers would be a good start, and then something that says actually this primarily works in west of the county or whatever, just to guide people. Some sort of search tool through that would be really helpful.
Yeah, well, it's again, if you look at the website, you'll see we've got obviously those that have already completed the pro forma that we sent round, and there's actually a link on there to a Google document where new projects or projects that aren't on there at the moment can register what they do. And I think, you know, perhaps one of the questions in terms of communications is about how do we reach the other providers out there who aren't yet on there, who haven't come forward. You know, in terms of communications, well, how do we best handle that? Is that through contacts that we've each got? Is it through using social media just to publicize the whole profile of the campaign and draw people in? What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to just distribute it to the schools that I work with in North Norfolk.
Right.
It's just like firming up what's in it for them, because when I send emails, it's been my experience that if it's not sort of very, very clear what we're offering to the schools, that ends up languishing the bottom of people's emails.
Sure.
And when I distribute information, I do a sort of a termly updates of things in the community, so I can obviously direct them to the website. And
Yeah.
so what we're doing is looking, you know, advising them that these are the opportunities for linking with organizations in their areas. And of course they'll be very, very specific, because there'll be, you know, transport and other issues. Obviously, if it's not next door to the school, they can't move all the children to that particular place. Or are we looking for them to promote it to their children that they look after? So to promote, like, posters for them, promote it in the schools for the children and their families to connect to.
Yeah, I mean, Claire's put a comment in, can we get some posters up in all the schools advertising the website? Good thought, Claire. Again, something we could.
Well, we can. I mean, we can distribute. Well, I'm happy to distribute them, but you know, it will be up to the schools whether they put them up or not.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
but
Sure.
if we had, you know, an actual poster or a flyer that could go out to schools, and they have systems like Class Dojo, and when I send things into them, sometimes they will distribute them to the children and young people through that to the parents.
Right.
So they have some of them have quite developed communication systems. So you'll send something to them, and then they'll send it out to the parents directly through that way.
Yeah.
So something like that would be good, with a picture and a picture and a link. So very, very simplistic, and then a line of what it is.
Yeah.
That type of communication.
I mean,
otherwise it doesn't get read.
No, understood. I mean, there is a fundamental issue here, which I think we're probably going to run up against on a number of occasions, is money and you know, funding for things like that, and also obviously someone to actually design the thing, get it printed, or whatever. So yeah, basically,
I don't think you even need to get it printed, but just a virtual, you know, like a virtual little flyer.
Yeah,
that
well, that
can,
might
and
be,
I can promote that on my, I've got a community Facebook page as well, so that can go on there too.
yeah. Well, that would be something perhaps I could ask Harry to look at. I mean, she's been very obliging so far, and she's perhaps got the skills that we can put that together. And Claire said I can get it on the integrated front door site, the Children, Young People's Mental Health team. Yeah, so
Yeah.
again, we can think of, I guess, a number of outlets here, aren't we, where we can actually publicise the website. And thank you very much again, Claire. Consort printing and postage. Well, that'd be great if we can get some hard copies that can go up, as well as the virtual ones.
Nice QR code is always
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
so people can just ping it with the camera.
yeah. I guess timing is critical here. I mean, as I said, the website is in development. I don't think it's quite there at the moment in terms of something that's a convincing offer to people. But yeah, we can time that, can't we? Do a bit more work on development of that, and then maybe produce posters with QR codes, which can be virtual, but also perhaps hard copy as well. Great, good thought. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts in terms of, you know, reaching our audiences? Any different approaches, I suppose? Yeah, Claire's tying into nature prescriptions. Good thought. We'll come on to talk about nature prescriptions later, Claire. And yeah, that's something we can tie in maybe. I mean, it's still relatively early days, obviously, for us. And we need to build momentum on this, and we need to engage a whole range of different audiences.
It might be worth, certainly I'm just thinking from a museum service perspective, getting some materials together for a stall or a stand so that First Nature can attend events. I'm just thinking of some of the larger events at Gresson Hall. We have up to 3,000 people on site in one day.
Yeah.
A lot of those being families and young people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, good thought. And I guess you know, other opportunities will come up. I'm thinking, you know, we've got our Green Care Festival coming up, for example. We could do something for that on the end of July, and maybe, dare I say, events could perhaps be themed around nature connection for children and youngsters as part of the festival. Again, little thought.
Royal Norfolk Show as well, possibly not this year, but next year maybe.
Yeah. I mean, without putting you on the spot, Ben, is that something in terms of a stall that you could maybe coordinate altogether?
Yeah, I could investigate that. I think it would need to be a conversation that we all have about what the stall would offer. And we'd need to have people willing to run a stall at various events. I could certainly cover a few, but I wouldn't be able to cover ones when it was maybe at a museum site, because I'm probably doing something else on those days. Helping out
or something.
Yeah, exactly. So but yeah, I think we'd need to think about what is a engaging offer for a stand like that, so that there's something for the young people to do and remember and potentially take away with them. A craft activity. I mean, seed bombs is a good one, but I'm sure we could come up with some other things that they could do at different times of the year when we're not going to be planting wildflower seeds. And then also the sorts of materials that a stand like that would need. So you know, we'd need a banner. Ideally, we'd need some flyers. Again, I know there's cost implications there, but even if it's a QR code that people can scan, you know, something for people to engage with when they come and speak to the person running the stall.
Yeah, and again, Claire's mentioned in the chat, integrated care system is going to be at the Norfolk Show, so we could put leaflets perhaps with them, you know, to promote this as well. That's great. Thank you, Claire. Okay, well, I mean, I think at this stage, if you're happy just to have some initial thoughts about that. I mean, we can't really pursue it in detail today, but if there's anyone else with any ideas, perhaps get in touch with you.
Yeah, definitely, that's fine.
Great, that's fantastic. Thank you for your help. and we can come back and look at the detail of that hopefully fairly soon. I can speak to Harry about putting together a flyer stroke poster. And again, if you've got any thoughts on key messages and so on, please perhaps get in touch with me on that side of things. Any other things in terms of communications that you think we should be pursuing at this stage? Again, this is something that will grow and develop, I guess, over coming months, but I guess we're talking about the next few months, particularly in terms of raising the profile of where we're at and where we're going. If not, are we okay to leave that there for the moment? Yeah, Ed.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, good morning, everyone. I've been a bit quiet because I'm geographically sort of restricted to the North Norfolk Coast AONB, but I do have some funding.
Did they ever let you out?
No. But I've got some money available that would be eligible for schools and parish councils, community groups, and I'd be happy for the Nature First organisation to sort of direct people to that and promote it, and
right,
get some sort of comms and publicity that way.
Yeah.
It's just working out how, isn't it? But potentially it's available for farm visits as well. So if a farm visit group organisation, or if a farmer wanted to have a visit on his site, we could pay towards the cost of the organisation that promotes it. Or I think there are a couple of countryside farm visit groups. Or if a local school needed
country trust
transport, for example, for the visits.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
working out the best way to promote it.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on something else which we'll talk about in a moment, which is the Bishop's Award, and that's something else that we can publicise. It's available and people can apply for that if you like. So there's some real positive things. If anyone else has got any, I guess, funding opportunities that are relevant to this, then we can put them on the website, and again we can direct the people to them through the other materials that we've just been talking about, flyers, stalls, and whatever. So if you've got funding opportunities, or you can think of others that have got them, then let me know.
Yeah.
Okay. And Ed, if you can send me some details on what you've got, and we can get that slotted into the website, perhaps, as a sort of support element. Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on from communications, unless there's anything else anyone wants to pick up on at the moment? So just to sum up, really, Claire, obviously, if you're happy to fund some of the things we've talked about, that would be really helpful. Maybe once we've developed the ideas a bit more, particularly around the flyer and the poster and so on, we can have a separate discussion about how we take that forward.
Yeah, no problem.
Fine. Other than that, I'll be in touch with Harry, and as I say, if people can contact Ben about the stall idea and me about the sort of flyers and associated things, we can take that forward. All right, moving on to mapping then, which we've touched on already. Ben, I know you had a meeting a few weeks ago, didn't you, where you had a certain initial discussion about how we take this forward. And I think, just to summarise, I think what we were trying to do was to, what we've already referred to, map existing provision or opportunities for Nature Connection that are already out there, but also map where access is limited or poor. And that could be in terms of, I guess, principally geography. So areas of the county where people aren't very close to green space or other opportunities to connect with nature. I think that's where we were at. Do you want to say a bit more about where you got to in that meeting and where you think we're going with the mapping?
Yeah, I'll try to. It's all a bit complicated, but we certainly got some good advice. So the meeting included two of the people involved with GIS mapping at Norfolk County Council as part of the Environmental Services team. Their work is focused on large-scale nature recovery strategies, essentially. And Argus from Wild East was with us as well, and he was contributing through his experience creating the map of dreams. And we had quite a good discussion about how Nature First could fit into this, because I felt, at least, that we've got different levels of mapping on offer, and I think Nature First, what we can offer that's unique is something that is all about that grassroots, getting people into caring about nature. The other maps are on a much higher level. They're much more strategic. They're much more about helping support people who are already doing great work. What we're trying to do is create a map that inspires people to start that great work. Argus has offered one option for us, which would be to essentially piggyback onto the platform they use for the map of dreams, and then we could put in data for engagement and provision, and data for access to nature. We have to think about how we collect that, and we would need to have a conversation with him to make sure we're collecting it in a way that can then easily be translated into a map. I'm talking from a complete amateur perspective here. I don't understand anything about GIS. I'm just trying to communicate what was discussed, my understanding of what was discussed in the meeting. The other options are Google Maps, various Google Map tools that can be used, which are free. Argus said that would be a great place to start, but that we may find quite rapidly, once we start collecting data, that then falls under God, my brain's gone blank. My brain has completely forgotten the acronym. GPR. No, that's not it.
No.
Sorry.
What were you trying to say?
GPRS.
GPRS. Thank you.
Ah.
Friday mornings. Once the data we're collecting falls under that, then we need to put it on a more secure platform. So Google Maps can be a place to start, but it wouldn't be our permanent home. My colleague at the County Council, Eva, has she works in the Natural Norfolk team. She's not part of the mapping team, but she has extensive experience building websites, and she has offered to have a sit down with Harry, if she'd like, to discuss tools that might work to help get a map off the ground. So I'm happy to arrange that meeting. I suppose it's just really about us all as a group having a chat about what we want to see on that map and what we don't want to see, so we can then have a really clear idea of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for that. I think just to say where I think we're at the moment, again, if you've looked at the website, it's a bit like the Green Care Network website, where we have brief information about green care projects, and then they are mapped on a Google map with a, one of those indicators and so on. So there is a clear map people could go to and see where certain things are. And I think the way that we were envisaging the First Nature website going is along similar lines in terms of what's already out there in terms of opportunities. We've only got a relatively small number at the moment, but hopefully that will grow over time. So I think, in a sense, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Ben, that I think that can stand almost as almost alone as a map in its own respect. It's achieving its own aims, if you like, in terms of communicating opportunities that are there and where they are. The bit where I think it starts to get a bit complicated is really what you were talking about with the GIS and this point about where people are close or not so close to nature in the sense of green space. And I think that's where we were coming from. Certainly the launch, that was something I mentioned. And I wonder whether, rather than attempting to overlay the one on the other, whether we ought to just stick with two separate maps at the moment, And then at some point in the future, when we've got enough information together, particularly about where existing nature connection opportunities are, some of which will correspond to green space, but others which won't probably, we can think about ways in which we can combine them together. I don't know if that makes sense as a way forward, but I think your idea of Eva and Harry getting together to talk about, that path of development, that would be very useful, I think. What do other people feel? I mean, is what I'm saying what you expect, or do you think we ought to handle this in a different way?
I'm not sure that we know. I don't know if we know everything there is to know.
Yeah.
Which is a really odd thing. Do we know does somebody know what's out there? Do we need to ask every parish council to fill in a pro forma and say, have you got a woodland that's open to your community? Is it like, I don't know. Does everybody know? What don't we know?
Well, I mean, Ben, perhaps, and Ed, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's fair to say that there are lots of different maps available showing different types of green space. And I don't know if you remember, Sam, I showed one briefly at the launch, which showed, I think it was settlements, and it was mainly, villages that were clustered together that didn't have access to a reasonable sized piece of green space that they can access within a certain distance. And that was really the starting point for me, I think, because that starts to tell us, Village X is in need of ways of getting to, or it needs to have more green space on its doorstep than it's currently got. And again, I mean, through your contacts at County, Ben and Ed, I guess you will know what action is in hand in terms of dealing with those issues. So green infrastructure is the key phrase, isn't it? Where green infrastructure planning is starting to come in, particularly in Greater Norwich, but I think will probably extend to other parts of the county. It's those sorts of connections I think we need to explore a bit further. I don't know if that answers your question, Sam, but
there's something for me about there's two kind of strands here, because if I'm asking what are we communicating to young people, and if I want a 14-year-old to wander down to a woodland area that is open to them, they need to know that that's there.
Yeah.
You want the activist young people that want to campaign about the stuff that's not there.
Yeah.
And they're not the same young people. So
yeah, no, that's a good point. I suppose, yeah, that's how we would use the information that we're talking about gathering, isn't it? I think. I think basically we need a way of conveying where there's a deficiency in access, but also, as we've said, where there's the opportunities as well, whether that's through informal visits to woodland or through some of the projects that we've started to list on the website.
And I think once you start saying what is there, people are very quick to come and tell you that they haven't got it. And so that will then highlight, well, I don't have that in my village or in my town or whatever. And then that's when we start going, well, okay, who's interested in doing something about that?
Yeah. Anyone have thoughts? Ed?
I think I agree with that completely. And you mentioned about there's almost two strands of information and reasons why it gets collected. And it's interesting you said it's for young people wanting to go and do things. I think it runs right through to adulthood, doesn't it? Because there's people on parish councils and adults that want to either protect what they've got or create something that isn't there. I think the reasons that sites get mapped and recorded is either through the planning process, if a parish level is creating a community plan or a neighbourhood plan, or part of a district level, green infrastructure plan, which we've heard about the mapping of that. So that all gets recorded formally, but it's not. And the other side is there's lots of parish councils that are just doing their own thing that don't record it. It's just within the village. So I'm helping a group in Morston at the moment, in Blakeney, called Swamp, and it's the sustainable work around Morston Pond, and they've just set themselves up to deal with non-native species in the pond. But their group is growing and growing with local people and schools getting involved, picking the plants. But they're not part. They used to be a much more active Norfolk Biodiversity Partnership. So groups like that would get recorded, or they'd be feeding in or contacted.
Yeah.
So things are still happening a lot, but it's not, there aren't necessarily the resources at the moment to collate it all, or ask people to send in, like you were saying, do we write to every parish council? Maybe there is a way they could feed in what they're doing currently, and it's the best place to collate all that, whether it's through the Wildlife Trust or the Norfolk Biodiversity Partnership or NBIS. So yeah, so that'd be a really interesting project in its own sense, I think. The sort of collation of the activity that's going on out there.
Yeah.
It's a shame that Isabel isn't here and others, because groups like the Wildlife Trust, the RSPB, they will be working with these local groups and schools.
That's right.
And I know we did start forming a list. I think in the early days we were collating a list of groups that we know of already.
Yeah. Perhaps just to cut in, it's just perhaps we just need to reinvigorate, if that's the phrase, that initial approach, and think through the sort of examples you've given, Ed. Can we get information on those on the website, in the way that I've described, and a marker on a Google map that shows where they are with contact details if people want to get involved, that sort of thing. Yeah. Charlie.
Sorry, Mike, my internet's being slow, so I've turned off my camera.
Right.
There's, I think, another way of trying to, so obviously the Natural Norfolk team are mapping all the green space and things like that for the strategy, and I think they're aiming to get that done, mapping side, by August, and the strategy written, and that'll be, I think, quite an extensive view of green space in Greater Norwich, and hopefully it'll go across Norfolk eventually. But I think looking at parish levels, I do a lot of commenting on neighbourhood plans, and within a neighbourhood plan they outline the green space within their parish, and lots of parish councils and town councils are creating these neighbourhood plans. So I think there's an opportunity there if we recognise, or a young person recognised, that they weren't accessing green space or nature. I think there's an opportunity there to direct them to, or for us to, or somehow we find from the neighbourhood plan where that green space is and link it up like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got connections, as you probably know, with Norfolk Association of Local Councils. Tim O'Riordan, who isn't with us today, is their president, I think. And, that is obviously a channel that we can use to get to most, if not all, parish councils across the county. It's just being clear on what we're asking them, and it's picking up on the sort of things that you've been talking about, I guess, isn't it? That are you aware of any, I suppose, nature connection opportunities in your patch, whether that's just a piece of green space or whether it's a project or whatever, and to let us have that information, and then we can add that to the map. Ed.
Yeah, it's just one very quick point. I think it's a good starting place for anybody wanting to do a project to contact either their parish council or city council, borough council, because there's a good chance there'll be some information on the website, or somebody will know if they own a piece of land. Often lots of the neglected bits of land in a village are owned by the parish council.
Yeah.
So it's often a good starting point, and then they can always direct them to different grants or whatever. Yeah.
I wonder whether the way forward, as you've mentioned, Ben, again, very kindly offering to arrange the meeting between Eva and Harry, whether that is the next step, which is if Eva is aware of the range of information that's available or is becoming available, we can start to talk about, what information do we need to map ourselves? What form should that take on the website? And how does that sit alongside, as I've suggested, the information we've already got about projects which we're starting to map on a Google map, you see what I mean? Does that make any sense? I mean, or have you got other thoughts about how we take it forward, really?
Eva will definitely be able to have an informed opinion about what is possible. She works very closely with Cherry and Danny, but again, as Sam said, I think it would be interesting to see what the data says versus what the young people say.
Yeah,
definitely worth doing though. It's definitely worth it. You've got to do it and then refine it. I also think, you know, all the things that have just been mentioned by Ed and Charlie, that we just do all these things. We speak to all of these teams and all these people and see what they can do to help us.
Yeah, and again, it's perhaps staging this, isn't it? Rather than trying to do all that at once, if we can have at least a starting discussion, as we've just suggested, that identifies, if you like, the best map, if I can put it that way, that we should start with, and what does that tell us in terms of access to green space in its broadest sense. That's a starting point, and we can start to then contact parish councils and other groups and say, look, this is what we know at the moment. Have you got any information that you can add to that? Or are there any issues that you think are important in your community around nature connection for youngsters and so on? Shall we leave that there? Is that okay, Ben? If you, again, sorry to burden you with something, but are you able to set that meeting up, and maybe you want to perhaps participate in it, given that we've had this discussion and you're aware of obviously our thoughts on this? That's okay. Yeah, great. Thank you. Anyone else want to come in on that before we move on? No, great. Well, thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Nigel, sorry.
Yes, Graham.
I've got to leave in just a few minutes, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd preempt something else for Ben that we discussed in the schools group yesterday. I'm hoping that Ben will be able to work with Mike Roper in the autumn to do a survey of schools in terms of what they do in their school grounds. So that's sort of, that'll give us a good start, because we don't have that data, we don't have that information at the moment. So we need to create some sort of survey. Realistically, it would be autumn term before we could get it out and get a reasonable response. I don't think that we're going to get a huge response to that. It'll be an autumn term thing, so we hopefully have replies for the sort of winter period. But hopefully I can get some fun Mike to work with Ben to do something on surveying schools in the autumn. Is that okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean,
So
again, that's another layer of map, really, isn't it? Where we're saying, which is what schools are up to, and we'll come on to talk about the schools in a minute, in terms of the work you're doing there to coordinate your approaches, etc. Thank you very much, Graham. That's helpful.
Yeah, so I'll leave you to it, and I'm going to leap into an electronic meeting at the moment. So, okay, take care.
Thanks a lot. Be in touch. Thanks for your time. So moving on to the schools work, or that theme, again, as I think I mentioned at the beginning, there was a meeting I think yesterday that Isabel coordinated, and she sent me an email, I think summarising the priorities I think for each participant were. I don't propose to go through those in any detail now, but I suppose I had a reflection on that. I mean, it's important that we understand individual priorities. And I think there's been, tell me if I'm wrong, Ben, because you were involved, I think a lot of value in bringing you together in order to coordinate and better understand what each of you are doing, which is great, because I think one of the things we've talked about is not trying to overload schools with lots of different approaches and so on, but to take a coordinated approach, which is perhaps manageable for them. But what I said to Isabel, and I think she's accepted, is that it would be very helpful, I think, perhaps as the next stage, to think collectively as a group in the context of this campaign. What are the priorities for connecting with, supporting with, working with schools that we would want to see as First Nature, as opposed to what each of you are doing, if you see what I mean? I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's it's partly about, I guess, coordinating things, and in the spirit of not overloading the schools, it's maybe taking that idea of a coordinated approach one stage further and almost saying to schools, well, here is a package of opportunities or projects or other ideas that you can tap into. Come and talk to us, that sort of approach, whatever. Ben, did you want to say anything about yesterday's meeting as well, and reflect on what I've just said? I mean, does that make sense as a way forward?
Yeah, absolutely does. The meetings have been very meaty because there's so much to be shared. So we haven't finished sharing all the stuff that we're doing as a group, as a working group. So yeah, there's not a huge amount to say about where things might
Sure.
progress, but definitely one of the things that has come out, which Graham just touched on, was this possibility of mapping what schools are doing and mapping the projects they're involved with. That would be a useful tool for I think certainly for providers to be able to go, okay, where are the areas of opportunity, where are the areas that are really well covered. Yeah, I don't know what people's thoughts are about other things that we can offer through First Nature. Yeah,
I think, tell me if I'm
that's
wrong.
yet to be discussed really
Yeah,
in the,
yeah,
in
sure,
the particular group.
I think the starting point, tell me if I'm wrong, was about this government initiative to encourage schools to use their grounds more constructively in terms of, was it about biodiversity principally or about learning? I mean, can you say a bit more about where we're at with that, perhaps?
Yeah, of course. So it was supposed to be the policy that the Department for Education are working on, which is the national parks. So it's the idea that all of the school grounds across the whole of the United Kingdom make up an area equal to Greater Birmingham, and so how can we use that better for biodiversity? Nothing's been announced yet, so we're just sort of patiently waiting to see what happens. But the Natural History Museum, who have been a major partner in this, have started to roll out pilots with a handful of schools across the country, and they have announced that they will be announcing funding. So there's going to be funding that will become available for this. But yeah, at the moment we're just hoping that Nature First will help us collectively get the jump on this and be able to support schools, because the resources are not, the Natural History Museum and the other partners involved with it are not going to be going out to schools. They're going to be providing resources, and schools will need some sort of support in interpreting and in implementing all of this stuff. And so yeah, there's a clear gap that we can help fill. How we do that is still very, very unclear.
Do you have any idea
Just
on
'cause
timing? You said you're waiting on details from the DFE. Any idea when those are coming?
we were told that it would be this month, which is
Right.
looking unlikely.
So
So
if we assume
yeah.
October, that's probably going to be more realistic then.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
We have got, I think I can't remember the name of the lady, but she works for Natural England. She's coming to the next meeting, so she'll be giving us a proper update in August. So we'll know a little bit more then.
Yeah, I was just saying, Isabel said she got another meeting arranged in August for you. Is that right? Your group? Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, that seems to be pushing along quite nicely. And so there are a few things there which you're working on. There's the survey that's been mentioned, which would possibly be in the autumn, of what's already happening at schools. There's the response to the government's initiative, which again, in the next few months will become a bit clearer, hopefully. And then I guess it's really, as I've said, maybe, in the course of your discussions, saying what is it that First Nature gives us as a collective approach to schools that makes sense for them, and meshes in with what we're already doing in a way, putting it in a not very clear way, but yeah. Emma.
Oh, schools are really, really pushed at the moment, and it's the I know from trying to get surveys that I've done, like stuff back from schools, they don't have the capacity, they don't have somebody to handle this. So I think from the, because I did that original that straw poll of the schools that I did surgeries with, and they were really on board. They all had a piece of, they all had a piece of playground or a bit round the back that they were willing and they wanted to be involved in it. but it's just capacity.
Yeah,
And unless we have something that we can go, right, here, this is what we're offering, this is the support we can give you. They don't have a lot, they don't have any money. They don't
sure,
have,
sure.
so the best way that I can see is like, this is a package, here it is, we can come and support you with this. And then they might be able to like get a couple of people go and talk to these people and then get the kids involved. And then I think once projects go, the kids will carry it forward.
Yeah.
So it's, you know,
Well,
it's the time with
yeah,
them, I
sure.
think.
No, totally understand that. I guess what we're
Yeah,
saying is
that's all right. I was just thought I'd say.
no, that's fine. Let's see what further information we get about the government's initiative, and does that come with any resources? Question mark. Don't know. But then there's obviously got to be a discussion about how does that get rolled out locally, and then the questions that you quite rightly are raising about the school's capacity to deal with it, we need to deal with as well. And how do we collectively, if we're going to take it on in some way, communicate and deliver and support that with schools as well. But that's a bit further down the track, I think, isn't it? Let's wait for the information to come in and see what it means, sort of thing. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on the schools front, or should we move on? Thanks for that, Ben. Yeah, I think we'll obviously through Isabel and yourselves keep track with your discussions and see where they lead. Awards is the next one. I think I mentioned the Bishop's Award, which we did announce formally at the launch, and there's actually on the website the summary note that I think I produced about what it was all about and who could apply, etc. We're at the stage now where I think we need to develop some detailed assessment criteria and find a way, well, really pull together a group, not immediately, but in the next few months, who's going to assess, you know, any applications that we get coming in, and obviously as part of that, develop the sort of detailed assessment criteria that we want to see. Just to remind you, the award is £1,000, and it's going to be for 3 years, so £1,000 each year. The Bishop was keen, I think, to see it focused on children up to the age of 16, inclusive, and the idea was that it would be to award projects or organisations that have already begun work to expand opportunities for children to connect with nature, but also obviously help to perhaps support and direct any further work that they're taking forward. I suggested, I think, in my note that the sorts of criteria that we probably need to think about are things like the impact of the project or activity on children's health and well-being, the potential for that to be expanded, the numbers who have benefited, the socioeconomic status and perhaps other factors that might provide obstacles to engaging with nature, such as cultural or ethnic background or where you live. So going back to our earlier discussion about, you know, access to green space and so on. And that's where we're at. Now, going back to our earlier discussion of communications, and the timing on this, because I think we're looking at perhaps the first award being made in the autumn, October time, and that would be an event where the Bishop would, you know, present the award. We could have an event that would feature information about applicants and the winner and so on. So we need to publicise that. We need to obviously get information out via the channels we talked about earlier, to get projects to put themselves forward or to nominate each other and so on. I've sort of mentioned the overall assessment criteria in general terms. Are there any things there that either you disagree with or things that you'd like to add? Is that along the right lines, I suppose, is what I'm saying, in terms of what we're trying to assess here? Any comments?
it's a bit of information really. So the young commissioners that are linked to each youth advisory board are already assessing grants that affect young people through the Momentum grant. So Momentum is the kind of overarching infrastructure organisation. They offer grants to young people's organisations for projects or training or activities, that kind of thing. And the young commissioners already assess those as a young person's panel. And I don't know if that's a system that you want to utilise. So it puts in that layer of young people assessing, and they so like our South Norfolk young commissioners appraise anything that's in South Norfolk and vice versa in North Norfolk, etc. So they know the local area, they know the local need, and they know the impact, and then they ask those quite critical questions about how does this affect young people, because they can see it's for them. And I'm sure, you know, certainly as South Norfolk YAB, we carry on doing that, and I'm sure the other YABs would be happy to put that in their a kind of agenda as well. So
that sounds
it kind of keeps that young people involvement, and they ask different questions to us.
Yeah, I would just stress again, age might be an issue here. We're talking about up to the age of 16. That covers your group? So are they slightly older, Sam?
Well, they're 13 plus, but it doesn't mean they can't appraise something, because they all have siblings and they've all they're not that far off a 5-year-old, so they understand.
Well, that sounds like a great idea to me. I know what other people feel. I mean, we could perhaps have them as an assessment panel, which could do an initial perhaps assessment of any applications that come in, and then perhaps pass their recommendations to, you know, an overarching panel that would make the final decision, sort of thing. Does that sound like a possibility?
Certainly does for us. So,
yeah. What do other people feel?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I've worked with the North Norfolk, so yeah, I'd be interested in that.
So Sam, could we work through you as the conduit really to get that message out to the young commissioners, as you call them, in each of the areas?
Yeah,
to
that's
say
not a problem.
Yeah, basically say we'd like them to be involved. Would they come together, or do they come together as a group at all across the county?
Yeah, they come together anyway. So if you've got a county-wide group, we could look at doing representatives from each YAB. If you've got something that's going on in North Norfolk, you'd send it to the North Norfolk YAB. They would have a meeting date within the next month anyway, so that's not a problem. So you get quite a quick turnaround, and then they would just add it to their agenda at that time, appraise it, and pass the information back to you.
Okay, well that sounds excellent. That's fine. Any other comments in terms of the sort of assessment criteria? Are there other things that we ought to be bearing in mind, or is what I've said really along the lines that we're looking for?
It sounds pretty standard for grant stuff. It's probably worth looking at a Norfolk Community Foundation application form and just using their template.
All right, interesting. Yeah, there's something available online, is there, on their website?
I should think so, but certainly if you start going through the grant process, you'll see the questions that they ask. So just pick a grant and go through the online form. Yeah,
okay. I mean, I said in my note whether we needed a small group to pull this together. I mean, I'm happy is perhaps not the word, but I'll give this another go if you like, and try and develop the detail on this. And if anyone else wants to join me in working that out and developing, and then let me know. Unless anyone else wants to take it on, really, that's the offer, I suppose. I won't see any big hands going up, I'm sure. Okay, I'll give that some further thought then, and circulate some ideas around for further discussion. The other thing which has come forward, which is again, I suppose, linked in with the awards, is that some of you will know Patrick Barkham, who's the president of the Norfolk Wildlife Trust and is a Guardian environmental columnist, and has written several books about nature connection and so on, including some that are about children connecting with nature. He very kindly has offered us copies of his books as prizes. If we'd like them. I've said yes, thank you very much, I've yet to have a delivery of what they are. I think it probably will be Wild Child, which is one of those that is very much about his own experiences, I think, particularly around forest schools and engaging children through that route and so on. Really a case of saying we will have those. Have you any thoughts about how we could use them?
Could it be part of the awards process? So actually, if you're a runner-up, or somebody that you think actually should be highlighted, it depends on your delivery, how big the box is, really. So
Sure.
if the box is big, add it to runner-up. If you only get one, then actually let's highlight someone as being a great achievement, and here you are.
That's a good thought. Yeah. So a runner-up prize or something. Yeah. Any other ideas? No? Okay. Well, give it some thought. If anything occurs to you, let me know. We could weave them into, I suppose, events and so on that we maybe have coming up in the future.
I was just, what about a school's prize draw for books, depending on how many you've got? And then you can send it out, link out, and they go into the prize draw if they click on if they go on the website. If they go on the website, they go into a prize draw.
Okay.
And then randomly you pick out somebody, because then that's a reason for clicking on the link rather than just.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect I don't know if what we'll get, but I suspect, having read some of his books, that they're probably more aimed at adults rather than children. Yeah. So we need to think about that.
I can go on the Heads bookcase.
That's fine. Yeah. Perhaps we'll wait to see what we get delivered, and then we can have some further discussions about the detail. All right.
It might be an incentive with the autumn mapping of schools and what they're doing.
Yeah.
Actually, if they, kind of, again, if get them to send in what they're doing in their grounds, and then they could be again put in the prize draw. It gets that information back then that people are asking. Yeah, no, it's a good idea.
An added incentive.
Yeah, use it as an incentive for information provision, whatever. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'll give those some further thoughts. Any further ideas, get back to me. Moving on then, those were, I think, the four main areas that we've been discussing up to now. We also had a number of other ideas that were very much in their early days of development. And I think it's worth us just spending a bit of time running through those, if it's all right, and see what your thoughts are. Backyard nature was the first one on the list, and we've talked about that at various points in the past. Say that I think I've mentioned it before that we've submitted a Climate Action Fund bid to the National Lottery, which I think we're due to hear about probably the middle of next month. That is primarily about supporting the development of this sort of community-led approach to biodiversity improvement, but also other environmental action that's sort of community-led, community-based. But included within that, we've made mention of supporting initiatives that particularly target different age groups or different groups in the community. So children and young people is one of those that we've mentioned. And Backyard Nature, if you recall, is something that already exists at a national level, funded through a consortium of housing associations that basically gives grants to groups of young people, teenagers essentially, I think, who want to do an environmental project of some sort in their area. And the housing associations are particularly involved because they're interested, I think, in seeing ways in which their odd bits of open space or green space could be made to be more, if you like, constructively used, whether that's for biodiversity improvement or growing food or a play area or whatever it might be. So I think when we last spoke, Clarion, who aren't, I don't think, with us today, but Clarion Futures, which is the charitable arm of the Clarion Housing Association, I think we're very supportive of the idea of doing a sort of a Norfolk version of Backyard Nature, which we could promote. I guess really in terms of taking that forward is, you know, A, does that still seem like a good idea? And B, perhaps we should wait on the results of the Climate Action Fund bid to see whether there's any funding coming to develop that. And I think we again need to have further discussions with Clarion and perhaps others. Daniel Salis, I think, has been involved from Flagship Housing Group in you know, opening that discussion up with them and other housing associations locally. So we need to sort of pull the threads of that together and see where that's got to. But what do you think about that as an idea of something we can develop that's got, if you like, a Norfolk badge on it and something which we could promote through First Nature? Any thoughts? We'll take a sip of coffee which has just arrived.
I think that sounds great and really exciting, but I think it comes down to resources again, doesn't it? How do we?
Yeah.
The scale of the support or the scale of how much we lead on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds a brilliant program. And if these housing companies are really keen to be doing the work, I think that the sort of collective knowledge that we've got and organisations would be a really good base of people to advise on it, so they're connecting it all back to these existing sort of projects and green infrastructure maps and parish level. So rather than just standalone wildlife areas, they'll be connected to a county-wide sort of ecological effort, connectivity.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, sort of nature recovery network element. Yeah. No, thanks for that, Ed.
But again, it's the sort of the scale of how much we take on, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a capacity issue. As I say, the Climate Action Fund bid, if it's successful, would mean that there could be 1 or 2 project workers employed for about a year that would, you know, take these various elements of that approach forward. And one of them could be developing this as a specific project across Norfolk, focusing on youngsters. And then that begs the question, obviously, you know, where does the funding come to fund those backyard nature projects? Well, that again is something we can look to perhaps seeking funding from other sources, perhaps from the housing associations as a starting point. So say Clarion seemed very supportive and they've funded this as well. But that's again for a bit further down the track. I think all I'm saying today is it just sounds like something that we ought to try and explore and develop as part of our overall campaign. Good. Any other views?
Nigel, it's Claire here. Sorry, none of my technology is working apart from my microphone, so apologies.
Right.
I think it's worth having a discussion with the housing associations. They've all got slush money, so to speak, to support these sorts of initiatives, and that is part of their requirement and contract as a housing association. So they will have their own funding pots available. But I think initially it's worth having a discussion whether we invite them all to one of these meetings and change the direction for that particular session. I don't know, on what their purpose is, what their ambitions are, and then see if we go see if First Nature can what we can do from there, basically. So I'd just like to know more clarity of what actually they are doing for their communities.
No, that's a good point. What I would suggest is we wait on the outcome of the CAF bid and see whether that's given us a starting point, if you like. And I think if that is positive, then that would be a great opportunity, as you've suggested, Claire, to get the housing associations together. As I say, I know Daniel has been trying to make contact with them, I think, around this idea and others. We can see how we can take it forward. Yeah. Good. Okay. The second one was one which I came across and which I've been aware of for some time. I think I mentioned the link to you in Scotland with the idea of a miniature or pocket garden design competition, which is basically something that's been running in Scotland through schools, where there's a competition to not only design but also create using a wooden pallet as the basis, a sort of a container for a pocket garden. and it's done on a sort of competition basis, and prizes are awarded, etc. Again, I think we've discussed this in the past, and I think I'm right in saying that there was some relatively positive reaction to that as an idea. Again, it begs all sorts of questions about organisation, funding, and so on. And I think for the moment, it's not one that probably we're in a position to sort of take forward firmly, but something that perhaps we can explore a bit further down the track. But any views on that really, as again, in principle, of something that we ought to perhaps be thinking about?
Is there something that we could be offering in terms of time? So I'm just wondering about like the Papillon project. So if you design your competition that actually within that school year, you would hopefully get some support from the Papillon project, even if you haven't had it. I don't know. I'm just trying to, so it's not necessarily monetary. Actually they get some expertise, so they win some expertise to help them put it into place.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's something we can explore. I mean, Papillon, as you probably know, only work with high schools. And I think, I may be wrong, but I'm not sure whether the Scottish example, not that we need to follow that, but I think that tends to focus on primary schools. It could be both, of course. Yeah, but that's a good thought, though, Sam. We could perhaps incentivize or support through Papillon.
Or the compost people, they get a worm farm, or
yeah, master composters. All those connections. RHS is another organisation. They've not come back to me, but I have contacted them about possibly supporting this, because they do support schoolwork, obviously, in various places. Alison Findlay is their local rep, I think, but she's not really come back to me on this. But they would be ideal, I think, the Royal Horticultural Society, to work through them and make all the sorts of connections you're suggesting, Sam, as well.
And even if the garden doesn't come to fruition, it's actually a tool of getting young people to think about
absolutely
nature and wildlife and all of that, isn't it? So
yeah, and again, I don't know how the scheme in Scotland operates, but it could be themed. You know, it's a wildlife garden, for example, or it's a health and well-being garden. What does that actually mean? You know, those sorts of things will actually be a bit of a steer towards the things that we're perhaps trying to achieve through First Nature. Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on that one? If not, I think the next one is really over to you, Claire. Nature prescriptions. We had I think, an initial discussion about the idea here at a previous meeting, and I know things have obviously moved on a bit. So would you like to perhaps brief us on where you're at with this? And I guess if you think there is an angle that is going to benefit First Nature as well.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel. So we had our first working group earlier this month, was it, Nigel? Yes, it was earlier this month. And then our second working group is mid-June. The health is going to collaborate with the Royal Society, the RSPB, to bring nature prescriptions to Norfolk and Waveney to give people, I guess, it's more of a psychological thing, but it's worked very well in other parts of the country, Scotland, Devon, Dorset, where the RSPB has collaborated with other health services, NHS services, to give someone a nature prescription. So I'll see if I can share my screen. Whether it'll work or not is another matter.
I need to allow you to. Hang on. Right, you should be able to now.
Okay, 2 seconds. Stop. No, I don't want that. Nigel, I'm going to oh, here we are, share screen. Sorry, the button's only just appeared.
Okay.
Can everybody see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So this is the template leaflet of how something's happened in the High Peaks, and you can see here that finding out more, which is the 4th page down. So I think we could definitely put First Nature links on there. But this is allows for social prescribers, health and wellbeing coaches to prescribe someone to go out into even look out their window for 5 minutes, to take a break and connect to nature. So this is what a prescription looks like for them, and we will tailor this to look like the Norfolk and Waveney landscape. So it might be a picture of the Broads, the woodland area, whatever that we need to decide on that. And then we have partners here. So anybody, we've got quite a few voluntary sector organisations joining this. So if anyone on this group would like to also be a partnership within the nature prescriptions, then we can absolutely get their logos put on our own prescription. The prescription tells us why nature is important, which I don't need to tell anybody here. And then a bit of evidence of how we know that it works because of the evaluations that have happened. And then everybody is also given, is my screen still sharing because I've flipped screens?
Yeah, that's fine.
It has, yeah. So you can see a calendar, yeah.
Yeah.
So what also happens for Norfolk and Waveney is a yearly calendar is given on things that you might want to do within nature within a certain period. Oh, I'm going to have to abandon you quite quickly. I can hear my son in distress downstairs on the call to my son, who sounds like he's had a car accident.
Oh dear. Okay.
A tyre blowout. So
yeah. Leave us, Claire. Get on that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Apologies. Sorry.
That's all right. That's a shame. If I could just pick up from Claire, as she said, there's been a working group that's developing this idea with the RSPB, and we did touch on the idea of having a nature prescription specifically angled at children and young people, and obviously it would be worded and it would have images and so on that were child and young people friendly, as opposed to a more adult version, if you like. We haven't really, I think, bottomed out that idea yet. And as she said, there is another meeting later this month, I think, or next month, to develop the ideas a bit further. The other bit was, whether we have nature prescription leaflets that are angled to different parts of Norfolk, given the different landscapes that we have in the county. And I think the feeling was coming that we probably have a general core nature prescription leaflet, which is things you can do in terms of observing or connecting with nature that you can find pretty much everywhere, but also there would be perhaps a section that said, if you live in the Brecks, or if you live in the North Norfolk coast area, or the Broads or whatever in the city, these are specific things that you might look out for as well. Now, where we go with the children and young people's version of that, I don't know. Whether we have a separate leaflet, as I say, that is designed and worded and presented with children in mind, we've yet to sort of discuss. But I think it was recognised at the first meeting that mental health issues, particularly for children and youngsters, is a key issue locally. And it may well be, therefore, that through I guess the ways in which children and young people connect with the health service where there are mental health issues, that could be used as the channel where this might become as an option to help them. What Claire didn't say, I think, was that the way this has been developed in other areas is it's very much as part of a social prescribing model, so that people who perhaps come along to their GP with a mental health issue that doesn't necessarily require a clinical response can be steered towards non-clinical activities and options to help them, and one of which is the nature prescription idea. So they would talk through the nature prescription with a social prescribing link worker, and basically you know, go from there in terms of using that as something to connect with nature over a year. And it was actually quite impressive presentation that Sarah Walker, I think she's called, from RSPB, who's leading on this, gave at a recent conference that I was at. Very impressive results in terms of patient feedback, doctor feedback, and others. Hence it, you know, went down very well, and why Claire is, you know, enthusiastically, I think, exploring the idea locally. Sorry, that's not too much of a rambling description. What do you think? Is that something that is attractive? Do you think maybe an idea of something for a children and young person's version? How would it work? What do you think?
I think it's a great idea. I think it's really lovely. I'm not sure that young people engage with social prescribers. Certainly in South Norfolk, you know, we talk to them regularly. There's not a lot of young people that attend a social prescriber or a GP surgery on their own. So maybe through the Just One Norfolk, the Children and Young People Service, so the Chat Health scheme, so the school nurses, essentially school nursing service, might be a way of looking at that. So it doesn't come from a prescribed background even, really. So it comes from another professional who can answer those well-being questions. Anyone going through CAMS would have that medical professional behind them.
Exactly.
So it's that lower level.
So
I
think that's the way we were starting to think. It's recognising, as you said, Sam, that children and young people don't go through, if you like, the adult routes of primary care. There are other specialist routes that they hopefully go through, and it's maybe those that we need to plug this into in order to make it work. Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts, anyone?
Well, it would be anything would be great, because we the mental health service of the young people in North Norfolk is just quite dire.
Yeah.
Like, we have
many places.
As a rural, we've only got 13% young people. And I think under the age of 16 or 18. So the resources are just not put in up here. So if you want to run a pilot scheme in the north, that would be great.
Yeah,
So,
you've got a campaign, haven't you, in North Norfolk as well? I know.
And we're so rural and it's so difficult.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got families without a car. It's, you know, we're a bit.
Yeah. I mean,
a bit rural. But they don't go outside.
making a connection with something you said earlier, Ed, about funding. Do you think this is the sort of thing that your funding might help with, or not?
No, exactly. I've just scribbled down Emma's name and some of those statistics. 13%, you know, young people. It was going through my brain as well how we could help.
Yeah.
I guess if the issue is transport or getting people out to the sites, that's quite a bigger challenge, isn't it? Because
we'll come on to that. Yeah,
you could have 100 people spread out across North Norfolk. So it's just thinking of the best way to support a project, but potentially, yes, we could help.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Whether that's through, it's just trying to think how my grant scheme would fit to funding travel or online links or something.
Yeah,
but I'm happy to speak to you, Emma, about that. If there's...
Yeah, that'd be good. I'll ping you an email.
Yeah. Like you said, for a pilot study, it'd be a good way to sell it, because the farming and protected landscape grants are about rural communities as well, and one of their targets is engaging the public with farming and the countryside. So it's definitely relevant.
Well, if you're both, I mean, obviously you have a discussion yourselves about it, which would be great. If you're both happy, I don't know precisely when the next meeting is. I think it's probably the middle of next month of the working group on this. If you're okay with me mentioning the principle of that idea, maybe doing a pilot in North Norfolk, there might be some funding available to support it. That would perhaps be a very helpful way of ensuring that there is a sort of children and young persons angle on this as well.
Absolutely. I'm not a community focus officer anymore, because I've got a different title. It's the same thing. But yes, so I work with the community and with schools. So yeah, that would be something that we could look at.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
I
And
only
I'll-
have funding. I only have funding opportunities for under fives, those. But that is
yeah.
something. That
Well,
we need to
don't worry. I mean, I
discuss.
think at this stage it's about pushing forward the idea, seeing whether, say, Claire and colleagues think that's a good idea in the context of the wider project. And yeah, we can be in touch about that. So if in your discussion, Ed and Emma, you come up with any further thoughts, please share them with me, and then I can pass those on, and
Yeah.
we can feed them into that working group. All right, good. The final idea, which I think we've talked about before, very recently actually, it came up again at the launch event, was about funding other assistance to school transport and visits to nature sites. Bit of background, I think this came to my attention when I made contact with a guy called Jeremy Buxton, who is a farmer in Booton, which is near to where I live in sort of Broadland, who had a visit from Reefham Primary School, I think it was, which is near where he farms, which he was really positive about. And there was some fantastic positive feedback from the children after the event, which we actually shared at the launch event I mentioned. And he's very enthusiastic, I think, about the idea of, could we get some funding together? But it also is a bit more than that, I think. Funding together to support schools that are, as we've already heard, are really struggling financially and in many other ways. So that's the principle of it. I think the little bit of discussion that we've had since that came up suggests that it's bigger than money. There's the whole sort of rigmarole of health and safety, risk assessments, finding staff, volunteers to accompany children on trips out, etc., etc. And I suppose we've got to the point where we're starting to think of, is there some way in which we could pull a package of support together for schools, which is okay financial, but is also about perhaps trying to streamline the process to make it easier for them to arrange trips out and to deliver those. Just to give you a bit of local background, I mean, I was not quite shocked and horrified, but I was, shall we say, surprised that my local primary school in Corston recently paid a visit. I think it was one class visit to Corston Heath Nature Reserve, which is literally probably no more than 2 miles away from the school. It cost them £300 to hire a coach just to travel that distance, which sounds ridiculous, but there you go. That's the world we have. So there seems to be a need. Somehow they found the money. I think they had someone who sponsored it. I think it was actually the Corston Heath Trust that actually paid the bill in that case. But that's I suppose, the germ of the idea at this stage. With his apologies for not being with us today, Nick Sanderson said he'd be very supportive of that, I guess, from the Broads Authority point of view, and enabling school trips out to some of the sites that they have and so on. Early days, but what are your thoughts on that? Is that something we should start to develop?
Absolutely, because I'm in North Norfolk.
Yeah.
And
Have you got any direct
transport-
experience of that then, Emma? Yeah.
I used to teach, so I know how much they cost. I came out of teaching a while ago, so I'm not. We used to try and do an annual trip, but anecdotally, from what I know about schools, they don't do that big annual trip anymore. They just don't have the funds.
Yeah.
It used to be, the stalwart at the end of term thing, but I'm not. I couldn't say hand on heart because I haven't worked in a school for 5 years now. So
Yeah. Okay.
but it is always transport up here is always a premium because we have, the public transport is a bit few and far
Yeah,
between. Although
exactly.
we've got the £2 bus cap, so that's something, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'm aware that as Emma touched on, then part of the problem is actually, as much as the cost, it's availability of coaches. We've had schools struggle to make bookings at Gresson Hall, not because of funds, but because they can't find a coach on the day that they can come to us. So I don't know how we could help with something like that, but
Yeah.
any way we could help would be brilliant. It'd be really great to come up with a package of resources that streamline everything. There are always going to be things outside of our control, things like parental consent and whatnot, but anything that we can help schools with, I think would be greatly received. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, 2 very positive responses. Anyone else?
I just think we need to be, it's a shame Graham's gone, because Graham needs to be included in this, in his role.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that's right. There were other people as well will have a contribution to make on this, I'm sure. Well, again, it's early days, and this is a bit further down the track, but at least we if we're positive about doing something about this, then let's start the process of talking about what it might contain, how it might be funded, and so on. And I know Jeremy mentioned was enthusiastic about contributing, I think, to that as well. So it'd be interesting to have his take on it and his contribution to it. Okay. The only other thing I think I mentioned in the email was the connection I'd had with some of the people know Matthew Redding of the Flourish campaign. I don't propose to sort of go through it all in detail, but basically you probably know this, that there is a Norfolk-wide campaign, I think around 300 organisations involved, really about promoting a better way of life, I suppose, for children and young people in the broadest sense. And it's a bit like Wild East in the sense that I think they work on pledges made by organisations that join their campaign. And it's perhaps a bit early days for us, but again, in due course, perhaps it's something we could think about making a pledge on once we've sort of firmed up our priorities and plans and so on. Anyone else know any more about the Flourish campaign? Are we involved in it at all? No, not maybe.
Yeah, it's an acronym.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's I don't, this is a bit of a test, isn't it, for a Friday? But it's
I didn't even try.
Go on.
family and friends, learning, opportunities, understand. I'm looking at the word flourish. Sorry, understanding, relationships. I can't remember what the I is. Safety and health. Happy health. Yeah,
so quite wide ranging.
Yeah, and so it's a set of principles that the county council wants everybody in Norfolk to work towards, so all children and young people flourish and in all those areas. MTM's made a pledge, and so is the YAB as well. Yeah, it is about, and it's kind of, you're buying into the county council's vision for children and young people, and so it's probably quite important to make one, but as you say, it's probably a little bit too early at the minute.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else any comments on that? If not, again, it's one to come back to at some point in the future, perhaps. Good. Anything else we need to cover today? I think that's moved us on a little bit. It's unfortunate we didn't have perhaps more people here, but I say it's a busy time of year. I understand that. Anything else we need to talk about today, other than perhaps try and arrange another meeting a bit further on in the future? Okay. I don't know how you feel about a further meeting. I think there's some obviously follow-up from today which we need to do, which I'll try and capture in a minute, or a note round to everybody. And obviously I'll circulate the link to the recording, which I'll stop in a moment. Busy times for people, but is a meeting perhaps mid-July doable? Does that make sense before we have the sort of summer break? Try and capture progress and firm some things up, perhaps. Does that sound doable, general terms? I know different dates are available or not available, but if we went for, say, Wednesday the 19th of July? No. Thursday the 20th? Yeah, okay. 10 o'clock-ish sort of time, doable? Okay, well, let's go for that in principle. And again, I'll circulate that around. I'll aim that to be perhaps a 1 hour. And in the meantime, obviously, we've agreed various bits of follow-up from today. Thank you for your support. And as I said at the beginning, I think, you know, we've got so far in terms of what we're trying to achieve. I think that we're now moving to that phase where it's all about the impact, you know, what the result's going to be. It's all very well having this thing called First Nature. What's it actually mean? What's it really going to do? And the areas we've talked about today, I think, are very, you know, central to that in a variety of ways. So please do what you've agreed to do, contact people you've agreed to contact, etc. And we can draw together progress when we meet again in July. That's okay. I'll stop recording.